All right, y'all. So, Matthew chapter 5. What does Matthew chapter 5 mean? So, Matthew chapter 5 begins what is known as Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. What in the world? The size of the crowds following Jesus by this point in his ministry have become massive. People come from great distances in every direction to see his miracles of healing and hear his compelling teachings. Oh, I bet that was a sight to see. Okay, so the words people use to describe nature vary drastically from place to place. A person raised in the Midwestern U.S. might call a body of water a pond, while a person from Central Africa might think of it as a lake. Likewise, what someone raised in ancient Israel might call a mountain, someone from Nepal might call a hill. Jesus' sermon was not given in a location resembling Mount Everest or the Rocky Mountains. Jesus likely delivered this sermon in the hills near his home in Capernaum on the Sea of Galilee. One traditional site of the sermon provides an elevated spot with ample seating, allowed a great mass of people to hear Jesus speak. Jesus sits down to teach, the position assumed by most religious teachers of the day. This elevated seating position would have been seen as a position of authority. Matthew chapter 5, verse 1. The crowd includes Jesus' chosen disciples, his committed followers, and likely some who were simply curious. The sermon itself may have been much longer than what Matthew includes in chapters 5 through 7. Call by Christ is explicitly Matthew's call by Christ is explicitly described in Matthew's 9:9. But ancient writings was not concerned with keeping events in strict order of time. Matthew's call might have happened during Jesus' ministry just prior to this speech. Matthew chapter 4, verses 2 through 5. This means Matthew may have been present for this message as a tax collector. He would have been fluent in reading, writing, and keeping records. That opens the possibility that this is a word for word of transcription of Jesus' sermon. Even if Matthew complied this from Jesus' later repetitions, the words are still surprising and even confusing and challenging. Matthew 5 and 2. Matthew's reporting of the sermon begins with a list of sentences called the Beatitudes. The name comes from the Latin word beatus, which means blessed or happy. Each sentence begins with the word blessed or blessed as Jesus uses it here means something like having a good result or outcome. It does not refer to the feelings of happiness. In fact, some of these statements involve pain and suffering. Reading from a merely human perspective, it is surprising to hear the kind of people he mentions are blessed. Human nature does not associate humility and mourning with good outcomes. Jesus' entire sermon, though, is ascribed to show those who listen that our normal perspectives are upside down. Wow. What matters most is humility in the kingdom of God. These attitudes are a reflection of those who understand God's will and his perspective. Matthew 5, 3 through 12. Next, Jesus emphasizes to his disciples that their lives are enormously valuable. They are the salt of the earth and the light of the world. That's why it is so important that they do the good works God gives them to do. It shows how in those darkness of the world, God will see. It shows, it is how those in the darkness of the world will see God. Like lamps, it's giving to a dark room, or salt prevents decay in food. Christian influence is meant to counter evil and despair. Matthew 5:13 through 16. Y'all, this is tearing me up today. Okay, so then Jesus makes it clear that he is not. Whoa. Jesus then makes it clear he has not come to do away with the law or the prophets. This phrase is a reference of the scriptures we all now call the Old Testament. They are not being dismissed, but Jesus has come to satisfy them. His mission is not to discard those commandments, but to bring them to their full and complete purpose. Come on, Jesus. In order to do that, Jesus explains the deeper meaning of those commands. This begins with a remark about exceeding the righteousness in the infamously strict scribes and Pharisees. His point is twofold. Their righteousness is superficial, and no person can be good enough to earn heaven on their own. Matthew 5:17 through 20. Okay, this is a long way, y'all. What does it mean to have a righteousness that surpasses that of Israel's religious leaders? Jesus explained this with a series of examples using a pattern of "you have heard, but I say." The point is not necessarily to dismiss the words being taught. Rather, Jesus' point is to explain that there is something more to God's commandments than bare legalism. In each case, Jesus explains that merely avoiding physical sin is not good enough. Woo. God intends his words to affect our hearts. Our thoughts and attitudes can be sins just as much as our behaviors and speech. Avoiding murder follows the sixth commandment, Exodus 20:13. Yet truly following the commandment as God intended also means not harboring unrighteous anger. Anger is not exactly identical to murder, but anger is a sin just as much as murder is a sin. Christians ought to seek reconciliation both with God and with others rather than face judgment. Matthew 5:21 through 26. The seventh commandment forbids adultery, Exodus 20:14. But God means something more than merely avoiding physical acts. The phrasing Jesus uses here implies active thinking, the choice to dwell, fantasize, or ogle someone. It can also mean making efforts to tempt another person into sin. Lustful thoughts are not the exact same as physical adultery, but they are every bit as sinful. With that in mind, Jesus makes deliberately exaggerated statements about the dangers of our urges. It's better to be maimed or blinded rather than to let our natural instincts drag us into hell. Come on now. Oh, this is going to have to be a part 2. Divorce in Jesus' era was giving very loose restrictions. In practice, men could dismiss their wives for virtually any reason. God's command about divorce was not a sign of his approval. Deuteronomy 2:24-1-4. It was meant to protect women from unfair treatment. Jesus shreds selfish attitudes towards marriage by saying no divorce is valid except in cases of sexual immorality. Marriage is not something we are meant to put and take off like a coat. Wow. It has sacred implications and should be treated accordingly. Matthew 5:31-32. Jesus also dismissed the use of our casual oaths. This does not mean wedding vows, courtroom oaths, or contracts. Jesus is speaking of sealing promises with some kind of "I swear by" statement. Woo. Woo, woo, woo. While the Old Testament allowed for oaths in the name of God, Leviticus 19:12, people of Jesus' era would swear on lesser things. I just knew I had that joker. That was wild, trying to kill that with my hand. Wow. Okay, people of Jesus' era would swear on lesser things, often to excuse later violations. People even today will add "I cross my heart" or "I swear" to suggest a promise is sincere. Since this implies the person's word is not always trustworthy, Jesus saying such oaths are evil. Matthew 5:33-37. Gotta come back for a part 2.